worse long run. So I know that some people find relief in their acute symptoms, their short-term symptoms with alcohol, marijuana, other substance use, but long-term symptoms of PTSD appear to be made worse by substance use, unfortunately.
An 8-point drop in IQ represents what percent of an IQ decrease? Average, 5%, 10%, etc.
Right. So the average IQ would be 100, and the cutoff typically between like borderline IQ and would be about 70 or so. So this is, if you add 8 plus, I think a good way to summarize it, which is how I summarize it later, it's on par with the drop in IQ with pediatric lead exposure, basically. Pediatric lead exposure decreases one's IQ by about 7 to 10 points, and then marijuana would be 8 points, plus another 5 if you're exposed in utero. So it really is on par with lead exposure, taking if the average IQ would be 100 to about to 90 or so, with the standard deviation being about 15. So hopefully that's helpful.
And here's a question about, I believe, a different substance. Does huffing trigger the pleasure center? And is there any way to detect this besides observing or self-report?
Right. Does huffing, so using inhalants, whether it's paint or some other inhalant, the dust thing for your keyboard, so that's you know, a real problem in adolescence. And does it trigger the reward center? In some cases, the answer is yes. It triggers increased dopamine in the shell of the nucleus accumbens, just the way all other substances of abuse do. And is there any way to test for it? Right. Confidential self-report is best. There is a urine test, but it's a special test that's expensive and can only detect the substance depending on what it is for 1 to 3 days. So really it's very difficult to detect. Youth with inhalant use tend to have significantly more symptoms of depression and conduct disorder than youth who present with other substance use disorders. And just anecdotally seem to be, inhalant use tends to be very difficult to treat, probably for that reason, more symptoms of psychiatric co-occurring issues.
How does in utero marijuana exposure compare to alcohol exposure, and by extension, how does it continue through adolescence, i.e. exposure to alcohol in latency versus marijuana exposure?
Right. So how does, basically how does exposure to marijuana compare to exposure to alcohol? That's a very good question. They're similar in that neither is good. There's no safe amount of marijuana that can, or there's no safe amount of marijuana or alcohol that would be safe in pregnancy. So the recommendation really should be to avoid both. They both seem to decrease IQ. Alcohol seems to have more effect in terms of cardiac effects, as well as other congenital abnormalities. The effects of marijuana that we know of seem to be limited to low birth weight and then these neurobehavioral symptoms that I mentioned. We know that in adolescence, alcohol exposure is also not good. Heavy alcohol exposure seems to affect the hippocampus and learning and memory. However, there are some unique ways in which marijuana affects brain development, including the IQ, the psychosis, the anxiety that haven't been found for alcohol. So neither is good for adolescent exposure either, but they seem to cause different, have different consequences. Nicotine exposure in adolescence is not good either, can predispose to more favorable response to other substances later on in life. And then, of course, tobacco exposure in utero also causing more symptoms, behavioral symptoms, as well as addiction later in life. So hopefully that answers that.
We have time for about 2 more questions in this first Q&A session. I will keep these note cards. If I don't get to your question this time, we will come back around to it later. And Dr. Thurstone, I may not pronounce each word in this next question correctly, so bear with me. In 1999, at a state conference, Dr. Carlton Erickson said marijuana-brain interaction did not happen in the nucleus accumbens, but that more research is needed. What have we learned about this since 1999?
Right. Okay. Interesting. I don't know who that is, and I don't know that he said that, but what I do know is that, yes, there used to be some thinking that marijuana was not addictive for some reason, and I'm not exactly sure why that is the case, except that there was some difficulty in developing an animal model for marijuana addiction. That since has been developed, and there's a man, Dr. Budney, Alan Budney, who is at Dartmouth Medical College, and he has dedicated his whole career to characterizing marijuana addiction. And so for further reference, you can refer to him on that. I think that answers that question.
Last one for this section. Why do people promote the idea that marijuana is safe?
That's a good point. So why do people promote, of course this would be my opinion here. Right. So, okay, I have a couple thoughts on that. So one is that I've heard a lot of people say, and I believe it to be true, that marijuana is like, using marijuana chronically or heavily is like having a low-grade fever of, 100 degrees or so. And maybe over the course of a day or two that doesn't cause any problems, but over the course of a year or two, that's really going to have a profound impact on your life. I've heard other people who are in recovery from marijuana addiction describe it as, well, cocaine took me, 90 degrees off course, and so it was obvious I needed to change course. Marijuana took me, subtly 5 degrees off course. And over the course of a week or two, that wasn't, a huge problem for me. But over the course of years, I woke up and realized I was completely the wrong direction, the wrong place in life. And so I think sometimes the impact of marijuana use can be a little more subtle than the impact of other substance use. And then I just have to say it too, there are a lot of people now who are making a lot of money in the marijuana industry. And so we used to have tobacco advertisements, 9 out of 10 doctors agree that smoking this brand of cigarette is better for you than that brand of cigarette. And we used to have the tobacco companies tell us that, cigarettes do not cause cancer, right? Who remembers that? Secondhand smoke is no big deal, right? The tobacco executives got in front of Congress and looked them in the face under oath and said these things. And so I think we run the risk of doing the same thing with other substances, and we just need to be very mindful of that.
Thank you. So that's a wrap-up of the first Q&A session. We will have several more throughout the day. I encourage you to continue writing your questions on note cards. I'd also like to let you know that we do not have a break planned before lunch, so please step out as you need to take care of yourself, and then we'll have another portion of Dr. Thurstone's presentation.
Great, thank you. People still with me? Still awake? You need more coffee? We need more caffeine in our coffee? All right. So thank you for those questions. Those were great questions. And all right, so I think we're on to the next slide here. So even if, and this is a big if given what I just showed you, even if there's no biological impact from adolescent exposure to marijuana, there's still, I think we would all agree, adolescents are going through a really important time of psychosocial development. They're learning who you are, what you like, whom you like, how to get along with people, what am I going to be when I grow up. All those things are issues that adolescents are dealing with, and so substance use can really delay that kind of development. And so what do we know about some of the psychosocial impact of marijuana use during this critical time period? So a very big study here of about 6,000 people followed from childhood, about age 2 or 3, into their early 20s. And this was done in Australia. And so comparing adolescents who had used marijuana by age 15 compared to those who waited until they were 18 or didn't use it. And what they found was that those using marijuana by age 15 were 3.6 times less likely to graduate from high school, over 2 times less likely to enroll in college, and almost 4 times less likely to get a college degree. So really, school achievement is such an important prognostic indicator for health, quality of life, so many things that anything that can be done to promote school achievement is a good thing. Now, teens using marijuana before sex, half as likely to use a condom, which makes sense. This is similar to alcohol as well. Anything that really impairs your judgment around this, impairs your judgment in general, can impair your judgment around risky sexual behaviors. So associations there with teen pregnancy and STDs. Associations between marijuana use and aggression, which is an interesting study, and again, I have my references here and I'm glad to share them. And so what's the story behind that? I've had people come up to me, marijuana makes people passive. What's the story behind this? And so the story behind this is that we've consistently have these studies showing that teens who use marijuana, on average, more aggressive than teens who don't use marijuana. So how to explain that? Couple things. One, I mentioned to you how marijuana produces a physical dependence, not just a psychological dependence. And so we know that during withdrawal, people are feeling irritable, restless, they can't sleep, they feel nauseous, they're depressed. Those are some of the symptoms of marijuana withdrawal. And during that time, they have more aggression, and then they get to be their baseline selves in terms of aggression by day 28. So marijuana withdrawal associated with increased aggression. Second, it appears that low-dose marijuana makes people more aggressive, kind of disinhibiting the way a few drinks might be disinhibiting. High-dose marijuana tends to make people on average less aggressive. So, I mean, kind of similar to alcohol too. If you're super drunk and you passed out, right, then you're not aggressive. But if you're loosened up, you can be more aggressive. And the way they've studied that is they get people into a laboratory and they put them in front of a computer screen. They play a computer game. You tell them that you're playing this computer game against somebody of your own gender in another room, and then the computer does things to deliberately upset you, like take away your points. And then they assess people's reaction. And then you can make it more interesting by giving them marijuana before that experiment. Low-dose marijuana, high-dose marijuana. And so people have more aggressive responses with low-dose marijuana and less aggressive responses with high-dose. So hopefully that explains some of that finding there. Then there's this whole finding, it's called the gateway theory, right? Gateway hypothesis. And I know there's a lot of controversy about it, but there's very little controversy that youth who use marijuana are 2 to 3 times more likely to go on to develop other substance use. Where the controversy lies around that is, why is that the case? Is it because these youth are prone to do risky things anyway, whether it's risky sex, risky driving, risky drug use, and so it doesn't matter if it was marijuana or not? Is it because the marijuana biologically primed their brain to respond more favorably to other substances? Oh, is it a social explanation that if you know where to get marijuana, you also know where to get other substances, cocaine, heroin, pills, whatever it is? And so they've done some twin genetic studies to try to tease this out. And it looks like it's probably multifactorial, a combination of those different factors there. So stay tuned as to why that's the case, but is it the case? Yes, I mean, dozens of studies across the world involving hundreds of thousands of youth have corroborated this finding here. Now, having said that also, there's this tendency to think of, oh, somebody's using just pot, right? Sometimes I laugh and just, I call it just pot, right? But really, as we've been talking about, marijuana in and of itself is not a good thing for brain development, whether or not they go on to use other substances. So I have some pictures here. I think it's helpful for adults to know what the new products are out there. We didn't used to see these products, and they're coming up more and more, and so I think it's helpful for people who work with youth to know what's out there so they can better supervise and monitor and just know the lay of the land here. So with the new technology, with new butane hash oil technology, you can turn anything you eat or drink into an edible, right? It can't be called food because then it would be regulated by the Food and Drug Administration, but you can call it an edible. So here we have, let's see here. And you see how a lot of these edibles, I think my point is too, a lot of these edibles are very appealing to young people. So you have here like the Cocoa Puffs, so my 7-year-old son would love those. These are what the Fruit Loops, that would be my daughter, she loves that. And these are more like Lucky Charms kind of cereal. And so these are all marijuana infused. All right, so let's see here if technology is our friend again here. What did I just show you there? Text to 22333. 22333. I should have my Jeopardy music playing while I do this here. But that would be right. So, I mean, I think everybody wins. Everybody's right. But right, this looks like an asthma inhaler, right? An asthma albuterol MDI, but it really is a vaporizer. And so we're seeing more products that are disguisable so that basically, you know, youth, anybody, but especially youth, I think, can use these discreetly. So thank you. What's this? Is this mascara or lipstick, right? This is, no, these are also vaporizers. And these highlighters, get it? Highlighters. So again, these look like highlighters, but they're also vaporizers as well. So maybe I'll just stop for a second about vaporizers. What's a vaporizer versus a smoking it? So smoking, you burn it and you smoke it. And then vaporizers heat to about 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and then people can inhale the fumes from that. And so it's thought that vaporization is, well, that's another myth we need to get out there. There's a myth out there that vaporization is safe. There's still carcinogens in vaporized products, And then, of course, there's all the impact on brain development, driving, as we're going to get into for adults, cardiac risk associated with marijuana, no matter how it's used. So that's vapor. And then vaporization e-cigarettes are a vaporization technology, really making a comeback now among youth. And so that's another conversation that needs to be had in terms of what to do with all the vaporized e-cigarettes that are, come in candy flavor, chocolate flavor, that are so extraordinarily appealing to young people. Okay, so highlighters. So these here are lollipops. Let me just look. And so, again, with butane hash oil, you can make anything into an edible, marijuana edible. The average serving size for an edible is supposed to be how many milligrams of THC? 10, yes. So 10 milligrams. I was looking to see, I'm colorblind, but I think that's green. The one in the middle there says quad dose. So 40 milligrams in a little lollipop. And so it's difficult to eat. You're theoretically supposed to eat a quarter of a lollipop. And so this is where some of the complexities arise in terms of, A, how do you eat a quarter of a lollipop? Usually it's multiply by 4, not divide by 4, right, when you're eating sweets. B, edibles don't take effect in many cases for 2 hours on average. So you can have a few lollipops and, hey, I'm fine, this is a dud of a batch or whatever, and then boom, it can really hit you and you can have an overconsumption experience that includes anxiety, acute psychosis. There have been some well-described cases of this happening recently. And you can see how these are very appealing to young people as well. The sweets, the bright colors. We had pushed for neutral packaging around these, the way cigarettes are packaged in Australia, and we failed at that. We were shot down by the industry. And then baked goods as well. So you have the goldfish and then the brownies on the right, and it looks like some cookies on the left. Anything really can be that. These Chiba Chews are pretty well known, and these were off the market for a little bit. The man who shot his wife and apparently, allegedly, he had been using Chiba Chews. So it's my understanding those were off the market, but they're back on the market now. And again, that says quad dose right there. So a Chiba Chew is like a Tootsie Roll. And so you're supposed to have a quarter of that Tootsie Roll to start with, and thus you have a high tolerance. And you see here, Butterfinger, Mr. Green Bud. Sodas, I have a number of patients who really like these sodas. And you can see again the cartoon advertising, the bright colors, the sweet flavors, pot tarts here. So again, really, I think disproportionately appealing to young people, really knowing your audience, basically. I showed you the National Survey on Drug Use and Health in terms of who uses marijuana disproportionately, and it's young people. So pot tarts. Now, people do ask, it says Kellogg's here, right? So that, to me, I'm not a lawyer, but it does seem like a trademark or copyright issue. We'll see. That may be coming down the pike. We'll see. And then ring pots here. So those are those little rings. You can suck on them. So just some of the lay of the land. Some of the advertising here around it. This is in Westward. I didn't see it in the Durango magazine that I saw at the airport, but here in Westward and some other periodicals in the Denver area, this is the advertising we've had. What's being conveyed here, right? Marijuana is healthy, sexy, natural, organic, green, young. disproportionately appealing to young males, right? So 70% of people in substance treatment for marijuana are male. Males outnumber females about 2 to 1 in terms of prevalence of marijuana use, so disproportionately appealing to young males. And then again, of course, there was a question, why do people think marijuana is safe? I mean, I'll pose the hypothesis, maybe because we advertise it with a green cross and with a stethoscope and with someone who's dressed as a nurse. I mean, those things I think subtly contribute to perceptions of safety, potentially. Now, people involved in the prevention field know that from our history with big tobacco, these kind of coupons disproportionately appeal to young people who are price sensitive. And so this is a very effective way, this coupon advertising, to appeal to young people. And then if I had brought my glasses and could read the names here, you'd see the names of the different strains, which I think also are kind of youth-oriented. So that's some of the advertising we're dealing with, and getting at maybe answering some of the question too in terms of why do we perceive this as safe, healthy, organic, natural, young, fit, things like that. Now this one's a little more subtle in terms of how it's potentially appealing to young people. But again, you have the coupons here, disproportionately appealing to young people. You have cartoon advertising here, which we can't do for cigarettes anymore, right? Joe Camel is so effective in targeting young people that we can't do it anymore for cigarettes, but we can for marijuana. And then what kind of font is this? I mean, to me, that's video game font, right? So again, kind of a subtle way to appeal to young people. Okay, so get a good look at that. This is something that I grabbed from YouTube. Let's see if technology is our friend again. What is this called? And it's the same number, 222333. Oh, I'm sorry, it's 22333. Is it dabbing, waxing, huffing, or vaping? Nice. That's good. So the answer I was looking for was dabbing. And so we'll go through this here in a second, what these different things are. So dabbing, we never used to see this. At least I never saw this until in the last year or so. Now we have a lot of youth who are using marijuana this way, and really it's the crack cocaine of marijuana. So marijuana used to be 2 to 3% THC by weight. Now butane hash oil is up to 90% THC by weight. And you can have regular bowl of marijuana, which would be 20+% THC by weight. So the bottom line is in many cases 10 or more times more potent than it used to be. That number, remember that number? What percentage of kids who try marijuana become addicted to it? 1 in 6. That's an old number. That study was done at least 3 decades ago. We need to know the same way there was a more addictive cigarette today than there was 50 years ago. Marijuana is much more addictive than it used to be. The THC content is in some cases 10 times more potent. There's an ingredient of marijuana called CBD or cannabidiol, which is thought to potentially make marijuana a little less addictive. And in some cases now CBD is being studied as a treatment for addiction. Well, anyway, CBD is being bred out of many of the strains, and THC is being increased. So you have a real double whammy, a much more addictive product than it used to be. And so now it's progressing also to its progressed in some cases to dabbing marijuana, in which people have a blowtorch here, and then there's a nail, some kind of metal filament, which you heat till it's white hot, and then you drop some marijuana wax or butane hash oil onto the nail, and then you take a big hit out of this device here. And my young patients tell me that it's like another world experience. It's just like completely different experience than regular marijuana use. And the patients we've had present with very severe addiction and have been very hard to treat that way. Not to mention you have young people in many cases who are intoxicated, in many cases who are using, I mean, literally playing with fire. And so there's been an increase in the number of butane hash oil related fires in the Denver area recently related to this. So dabbing, we should keep our eyes open for that. Just to go through it here, waxing, so marijuana wax, so waxing is something, and there's a very potent marijuana wax that can be made, produced, bought nowadays, that again is 10 times more potent than it used to be, and so that can be packed into a bowl. That can be used in the dabbing experience also. It's just a different way of kind of using marijuana that's very potent. Huffing is using inhalants, like huffing paint or glue, something like that. Or those scented markers out there that smelled so good with the name tags, right? Or vaping, we talked about that. Vaping is not burning the marijuana product, but heating it up to about 120 degrees Fahrenheit and then inhaling it from there. And vaping, I think I'm going to show you some more on that, but yeah, I think I have some pictures. Hopefully I do. If I don't, okay. Well, I need to talk about vaping some more. They're the vape pens now that are sold. One of the well-known ones is the Snoop Dogg vape pen. So again, another way to kind of target young people. It can also be, I walked into our waiting room the other day and somebody was vaping, and I mean, I asked them not to, even if it's tobacco vaping, it's still, we don't know what the secondhand effects of that could be. Needs to be studied more, but it's just it's more disguisable now, to have a vape pen. It doesn't smell the same way smoking does. So it's another way to be more discreet. Okay, so adolescence, again, no, we can't do the randomized placebo-controlled study in adolescence. So what are we left with, right? Always a shadow of doubt. In animals, we can do this study. Mice go through adolescence, day 20 of life. They can be exposed to marijuana during that time, and then you stop the exposure, you follow them into adulthood, you see what happens, and something very similar to what happens in adolescence happens in the animals as well. So you see that those animals who are exposed have decreased motivation, increased anxiety. Remember I talked about anxiety in humans? Well, that's corroborated in adolescent exposure to marijuana in animals, causes increased anxiety as adults, decreased short-term recognition, so impairment in memory seems to be permanent, difficulty with attention, and then the hippocampus, really important for learning and memory, significantly altered in these animals. So again, this is, it's kind of in some ways reassuring that the animal studies converge with what we're finding in humans. And here's some pretty pictures for you. So these are mice who were exposed to marijuana during their adolescent days, and then they grew up to be adults, and then the researchers opened up their brains, looked at their hippocampus, and to try to see if there were some differences. And so let me walk you through this a little bit here. So this mouse here was exposed to placebo. So you see this is a nerve here, and it's got lots of dendrites, they call them, lots of little spiky things coming off of it from here. and that's normal how it should look. The mice who were exposed to marijuana have fewer of these spiky things. See how smooth that is right there, right there. Some other parts that are smooth, not rough appearing here, lots of connections.